We're now on Daf Samach Dalid Omud Beis. And we're talking about a ribui in the pasuk of Kol Sheretz, that the Torah says that if you have a newly hatched chick from a hen, it comes under the lav of creeping shrotzim. And that we derive from the extra word kol. L'rabos afrochim shelo niftechu einehem. So it means the chick has not opened its eyes. And therefore, at this point, it's considered a creeping creature. And it matters not whether or not it comes from a kosher bird or a non-kosher bird. So therefore, the embryo of a kosher bird is also included under sheretz hashoretz al haaretz, based on the extra word kol. Why then does the brisa, when it discusses the characteristics of a sheretz, say that it came from a tmeah? Forget about whether it came from a tmeah. Even if it came from a tahora, like a hen, it would still come under kol sheretz hashoretz al haaretz if the embryo that was hatched, the chick that was hatched, has not yet opened its eyes. Now, we're at a turning point in the sugya where the Gemara is going to change one of the fundamental assumptions of the entire sugya, and that is midrabanan. Meaning, we assumed that when the brisa included a newly born chick in the lav of kol sheretz hashoretz based on the extra word kol, that's a doraisa halacha. And therefore, if you eat this newly hatched chick or the embryo of a kosher bird, you violate the lav of a creeping creature. No, that's only the Rabbanan, cross machta b'alma. Very often we'll see in Shas that when the brisa says shenemar, it doesn't mean that we derive a biblical prohibition from the following word or following pasuk, but rather that pasuk is being quoted as an asmachta to support a rabbinic prohibition. And therefore, according to biblical law, if you eat a newly hatched kosher chick, then even though this kosher chick is in a very early stage and it hasn't yet opened its eyes, it is not considered a violation of the lav of kol sheretz hashoretz al haaretz. Only in the case of an embryo of a non-kosher bird, or for that matter, an embryo of a sheretz, then the Torah prohibits it, if you eat it, under the lav of kol sheretz hashoretz al haaretz. And therefore, we understand now why the brisa had to mention that these are eggs of a sheretz and not of a bird. Because if these were eggs of a bird, then even though it's an embryonic chick that was hatched from a kosher bird, and it's not yet to the point in which it's a separate entity and it opens its eyes, nevertheless, you would not be chayv malchus, because this whole business of the embryo of a kosher egg, of a kosher mother bird being prohibited, that's only d'Rabbanan, it's not d'Oraisa. The pasuk is just an asmach. Ton Rabbanan. Now the Brisa wants to know what happens if you have eggs in a pot, and some of those eggs are permissible eggs, others are prohibited eggs. Do we have what's called gi'ulim? Gi'ulim means nesinas tam, that because they're cooked together, and again, we're talking about a closed egg, they would give tam from the prohibited egg to the permissible egg? No. Gi'ule beitzim mutaros. In other words, the Torah did not recognize a nesinas tam from one egg to another, even if they're being cooked together in the same pot simultaneously. Now we get to the case of beitzim muzaros. What are beitzim muzaros? Beitzim muzaros means that there was no male chicken that injected its semen into a female hen and fertilized the egg. It's a non-fertilized egg in which the mother hen sits on top of the egg, and the warmth of the egg causes the egg to develop. Are you allowed to eat these unfertilized eggs? Now, we have to add one point over here. There's blood inside the egg. So this is common almost every day. You crack open an egg and you see a blood spot. So the Brisa says that the determining factor whether you're allowed to eat that egg after you throw out the blood will be the personality of the individual. This is a phenomenal, this would be a Ripley's, believe it or not, halachic question to ask. Where do we find that whether or not you violate an Isur in the Torah by eating something prohibited depends upon your own personality, your own psyche. Nefesh yafeh tochlen. A person who doesn't mind eating an egg that had a blood spot in it is allowed to eat this egg because there's no bal tishaktu. It's not called a shikutz. If, on the other hand, he's the type of person who gets repulsed by eating such an egg, even after he discards the spot of the egg, the blood spot of the egg, then it comes under bal tishaktu. Meaning, if he doesn't mind eating the egg, and he's not repulsed by the egg, and therefore there's no Isur bal tishaktu, then we ask him to get rid of the blood, because we're afraid that if he is allowed to eat the blood, he might come to eat the blood of a fertilized egg. So he's got to get rid of the blood, and then he eats the egg. Fried, boiled, any way he likes it. Okay. Now, is it really so that anytime you find a blood on an egg, in our unfertilized eggs, you're allowed to eat the egg? Amar Rab Yirmiyah, it's not so. It all depends. The who shenimtza al kesher shalah. Where did you find the blood spot? You've got to find it on the kesher. And then you're allowed to throw away the blood and eat the egg, if it's no bal tishaktu. If, on the other hand, you found the blood anywhere else in the egg other than the kesher, then the egg is forbidden. What's the kesher? The kesher is the exact place in the egg where the sperm attaches itself to the egg and the embryo begins to form from that conception. Now, here there are two ways of reading the Rashi. There are two variant texts of Rashi. According to one text in Rashi, the kesher is located on the round part of the egg. According to a variant reading of Rashi, the kesher is located on the chad, on the rosh hachad. That's the part of the egg which is like tapers off. It's not round. Now, in my Gemara, I have here a diagram, and the diagram tells you where to find the kesher. Why? Because there's a kesher shel chelbon, which we said was the albumen, which is on the tapering side, the sharp side. There's a kesher of the chelbon, which is the yolk of the egg. And that's for sure okay. Then you're allowed to eat the egg. But the machlokas in terms of how to read the Rashi will chapen afgemina with regard to the kesher shel chelmon, which we mentioned before, but if it's not in the rosh hachad, but rather in the rosh hakad, which is the round part of the egg, the kesher of the albumen. So again, basically what we're saying is that the blood spot is a nascent embryo. It's the beginning of the embryo. And the embryo begins its lifestyle in that place where the male sperm impregnated the female egg. That's called a kesher. If the blood spot is found in the kesher, then we assume that we're in the earliest stage of life and development has not yet progressed to the remainder of the egg. Therefore, just throw out the blood and you can eat the rest of the egg. But if the blood is beyond the kesher, then we take it as a sign that this embryo has already reached a more advanced stage in its development, and therefore the entire egg is prohibited under that law that developing embryos, even in a kosher bird, come under creeping creatures. Tani dostoi avud Rabbi Aftariki lo shanu el shenimtza al chelmon shela, אבל נמצא על חלמון שלה אפילו ביצה אסורה מהטיימה דשודה tichla v'kula. So it means that when we get to the yolk of the egg, which is called the chelmon, then we assume that this development has reached the point where it permeates the entire egg. But again, as we said before, the two Lashonos about this. So, as the Gemara now says, the original Brisa had it said the exact reverse in terms of chelbon and cheshma and chelbon and chelmon and chelbon. But Abaye who detarts Neil Abaye turned it around. Omar Chizkiya minayin lebeitzas tmeya sheyasur min Torah. How do we know that the egg of a non-kosher bird is biblically prohibited? Shenemar v'es bas hayana. What's the extra word bas? Yana is an ostrich, the daughter of the ostrich. V'chi bas yesh la yana. Does an ostrich have a daughter? In fact, an ostrich lays eggs. It doesn't give birth like mammals to a living being. So why does the Torah talk about a bas hayana when such a thing doesn't even exist? What is the Torah referring to when it says bas hayana? Zu beitza tmeya. It's the egg of an ostrich, meaning an egg of a non-kosher bird. Very large egg. And that's derived from the extra word bas. So for the Gemara asks Vidilma Hainu Shmaya. There are many names that have two words to it. Two words make up one name. So it could be that the name of this ostrich is Bas Hayana. Lo Salkadaitach, I'm going to prove to you from many psukim in the Torah that the word Yana is the name of the ostrich, and the word Bas before Yana is an extra word, totally superfluous. Tichsiv, for example, we have a pasuk in Kinos, and it says there in Eicha, it says, Bas amilach zar kaya einim bamidbar, the daughter of my people has become cruel, like Yanos in the desert. So you see the word Yana is written there without a bas. Now the Gemara says, wait a minute. I'm going to show you elsewhere in Tanakh where the word is not Yana, but Bas Hayana, V'lovahok, Siv. What do I do with the pasuk in Micha, which says, Ese mispaid kitanim v'evel kibnos hayana. I will make lamentation like the jackals and mourning like bnos hayana. So we see that bnos hayana is the two-word name of the yana. And Gemara says that's not a proof, because kayan zushim isabelas al bonel. In other words, the word bas here is not part of the name of the yana of the ostrich, but rather it's telling you that the yana mourns its young. Vaksiv, what about the pasuk in Yeshayahu? It says v'shachnu sham b'nos yana. So once again, you see that the name of the ostrich is Bnos Yana, and therefore the Bnos Bas is not an extra word. Ki Yana zu shochenes im bonel. So again, we're trying to interpret why it adds the word Bas, which is not part of the name. But now I have a KTO from another pasuk in Yeshaya. It says, Techabdeni chayas hasode tanim ubnos hayana. The beasts of the field will honor me, and I think this is a foretelling of the end of days. Jackals and bnos yana. Now we're talking about a shira in which the animals will sing a song of praise to God at the end of days. V'isal kedaitov beitza, and if you're going to tell me that benos yana means the eggs, beitza bas memar shirahi, is it possible for the bas, an egg, to recite shira? Obviously, bas hayana is actually the name of the bird. Elo, I have to admit to you, ksiv hayano, ksiv bas yana. Some psukim call it yana, and some psukim call it bas yana. But here, in the case of the list of non-kosher birds, shiny hacha, the posak safra l'shtei tevos. We have a tradition that's passed down from one generation to another generation about how to write words in the Torah. The scribe, the sofer, has to have that tradition, and he has to know the rules of how to write words. And we have a tradition that we write bas hayana as two words. Now, if bas hayana is the name of the bird, then why would we split the name in half? Obviously, therefore, the fact that the tradition has it that you split bas and yana with a hefsek, empty space in the middle, means that bas is not part of the name. Frek Gemara, is that really so? When we meet a pasuk lu safra. Here we're going on to samach betarte tevos. Since the Sofrim write Bas and Yana as two separate words, Shmamino trace Shemos, it must be that it's not part of one name. Elameata, what are you going to do with Es Kidar Laomer? We know that the name of this king is Kidar Laomer, and yet the Safra, the scribes, were given the tradition, the Pasek Lu Safra betray. They write as two words. So you see that even when there are two words, they form one name. And therefore, Hachinami de Tarte Shmei Ninu. Maybe Bas and Yana, although they're separated according to the Sofrim into two words, maybe those two words make up one name. Amri. So the Gemara answer is Hasam Vishtei Tevos Pasik. In regard to the tradition that we have for the scribes of writing the name Kedar LaOmer, not only were they given the tradition that Kedar and Omer are separated with a space in the middle, but B'shnei Shitim lo pasuk luhu. Aval hacha afilu b'shnei shnitim nami pasuk luhu. Kedar LaOmer is one name, and you could have one name that's separated into two words, but on one condition. They're not written, those two words, on two different lines. You can't write Kedar and then on the next line, La Omer. They have to be written on one line because they form one name. But in the case of Bas Hayana, the tradition has it that the scribe not only could separate between Bas and Yana, but he could write Bas on one line and Yana on the other line, and that proves that Bas is not part of the name Yana, and therefore the word Bas in Yana in the tray for birds is an extra word, and we're going to use that to include a ribui, and that ribui is for the eggs of a non-kosher bird. And therefore we go back to Chizkiah's statement that minayin lebeitzas tmeira shehi asur min Torah shenemar v'yas bas hayana. And bas hayana is going to teach me that beitzas tmeya is asura min haTorah. The non-kosher bird its egg is prohibited from the Torah. Okay, then, so this is where we'll stop for today. Daf Samachein. Tomorrow we get together at 9:30, correct? Okay, then. So have a meaningful fast. I could really use a cup of tea, but whatever.